The grand halls of Buckingham Palace held their breath. In less than 24 hours, the British royal family would host one of the most critical diplomatic events of the year. Every detail had to be perfect, every gesture would be analysed, every piece of jewellery would tell a story. But behind the palace walls, a silent war was about to explode into the open, threatening to destroy everything the monarchy had worked to protect. This is the story of how a single tiara became the battleground for power, jealousy, and revenge within the royal family. And by the end of this night, someone's reputation would be shattered forever. The request that started everything. Camilla, Queen Consort, walked through the palace corridors with the confidence of someone who believed she had finally earned her place. Years of public scrutiny, decades of rebuilding her image, and now she wore the title that once seemed impossible. But titles and acceptance are two very different things. She needed something more, something symbolic, something that would prove once and for all that she belonged at the very heart of the British monarchy. The Rose of Windsor tiara. This wasn't just jewelry within palace walls. Certain pieces carry weight that goes beyond their monetary value. The Rose of Windsor had been worn by Queen Elizabeth II herself, to where it was to be visually connected to the legacy, to the continuity, to the very soul of the institution. Camilla made her request to Princess and the late Queen's only daughter, and a woman known for her no-nonsense approach to royal protocol. The conversation was brief. Camilla's request was clear, and response was even clearer. The tiara is with the jewelers for maintenance and polishing. A polite refusal, diplomatic final. Camilla nodded and left without argument, but anyone who knows palace politics understands this truth. The most dangerous people are never the ones who scream, they're the ones who smile, nod, and then quietly begin to move pieces on the chessboard. What happened next would prove just how far someone would go when they feel their place is threatened. The rumor that changed everything. Within hours, a whisper began circulating through the tied circles of palace staff and royal advisors. An inner circle was considering a different choice for the gala. Catherine, Princess of Wales, would wear the Rose of Windsor tiara. Think about what that meant. Catherine, the future Queen Consort, stepping into the international spotlight, wearing the very symbol that Camilla had requested and been denied. The message wasn't subtle. It was a declaration about who truly held the confidence of the family, about who the institute chainsaw saw as its future. When this rumor reached Camilla's ears, something shifted. The carefully constructed composure she'd maintained for years began to crack at the edges. Have you ever been in a situation where you felt overlooked for something you believed was rightfully yours? That burning feeling when someone else gets the recognition you've been working toward. Now multiply that by the pressure of living under constant global scrutiny, where every appearance is dissected, every gesture interpreted. That's where Camilla found herself. And what she did next would send shockwaves through Buckingham Palace. The disappearance 24 hours before the gala. During a routine internal transport, the impossible happened. The Rose of Windsor tiara vanished, not during a public event, not during a transfer through crowded spaces. It disappeared along a familiar secured route that only palace insiders knew. The sealed box arrived at its destination completely empty. The initial reaction wasn't panic, it was something far more chilling. The cold realization that this was no accident, this was surgical, intentional, calculated. Someone with intimate knowledge of palace security protocols had made their move. Buckingham Palace immediately went into lockdown. No dramatic and once mince, no visible chaos. Just the quiet, terrifying efficiency of a security system that knows it's been compromised from within. Access logs were pulled, surveillance footage was reviewed frame by frame, exit points were sealed, every person who had touched or been near that transport route was identified, and Catherine, in the middle of final preparations for the most important public appearance of her year, received the news that would make her blood run cold. Catherine's nightmare scenario. Catherine understood palace politics better than most. She'd learned the hard way that in the royal family, you don't need to be guilty to be destroyed. You just need to be standing in the wrong place when something goes wrong. If the tiara didn't reappear in time, she would have to wear something else. And if questions arose, if suspicions were planted, if the slightest hint of impropriety attached itself to her appearance, she would be the one torn apart by the media, not because of anything she'd done, simply because she would be the visible target. She caught sight of Camilla in a palace corridor. Camilla didn't look triumphant, she didn't need to. Her composed demeanor was its own kind of message. Eventually everyone will realize you're the problem. Think about that for a moment. Catherine had worked tirelessly to support the monarchy, to modernize its image, to connect with the public in ways that seemed impossible just a generation ago. And now, on one of the most critical nights, she was being positioned as the center of a scandal she had nothing to do with. How would you handle that pressure, knowing that by tomorrow morning your reputation could be destroyed based on nothing more than suspicion and innuendo? The investigation intensifies. Princess Anne took personal control of the investigation, no lengthy explanations, no tolerance for excuses. Her approach was simple and devastating. The innocent have short, clear answers, only the guilty need elaborate stories. The surveillance data revealed something terrifying, and its precision there was a gap. A brief moment where camera coverage had been bypassed, not deleted, not obviously manipulated, but just absent, a blind spot that lasted exactly long enough for the sealed box to pass through like a shadow. Someone had created a moment of invisibility. The list of people with access to that route was circulated, every name was examined, and on that list was a name that made the entire investigation take on a new, darker dimension. Laura Lopes, Camilla, his daughter. No one said it out loud initially, no one wanted to acknowledge what it might mean, but the implication hung in the air like smoke. If the path led to Laura, who was standing in the shadows behind her, and ordered an immediate discreet visit to Laura's private residence, not a raid, not a spectacle. Just the quiet appearance of security personnel who weren't there to negotiate. The discovery that shook the palace, what they found made the entire crisis crystallize into brutal clarity. The authentic Rose of Windsor tiara was there in Laura Lopes' home. Not hastily hidden, not carelessly stashed, it was stored carefully, as if waiting for an opportune moment, as if a plan had been designed with precision, and only needed one final step to execute. But that wasn't the worst part. There was evidence of replica preparation materials, measurements, documentation that proved this wasn't a simple theft. This was a sophisticated plan to swap the authentic tiara with a high-quality fake. Think about what that means. The goal wasn't just to take the jewelry, the goal was to ensure that Catherine would appear at one of the most photographed events of the year wearing a fake, and when that was eventually discovered, as it inevitably would be, who would take the blame? Catherine. The woman already at the center of endless media speculation, the one who would be accused of everything from carelessness to deliberate deception. It was a trap designed to destroy her reputation completely. Laura, confronted with the evidence, didn't have the decades of training and maintaining a public mask. She panicked, and in that panic the full scope of what had been planned became undeniable. Charles faces the truth. The evidence was brought directly to King Charles Clarence's house. Princess Anne didn't soften the blow. She laid everything on the table: the authentic tiara, the materials for the replica, the connection to Laura Lopes, and by extension to Camilla. Charles looked at the items for a long time. In that moment, he wasn't a king. He was a man who had just realized that the jealousy and resentment within his own household had crossed every conceivable boundary. His first instinct was immediate and visceral: exclude Camilla from the Buckingham Palace event, remove her entirely, a desperate attempt to contain the damage. William, with the cold sobriety of someone who had grown up under the most intense media scrutiny imaginable, blocked that impulse with a single devastating observation. A last-minute change would be a public admission that something was catastrophically wrong. And once the press smelled blood, they wouldn't stop at Camilla or Laura. They would tear apart Catherine, Charles, and the entire institution. The decision that followed was perhaps the cruelest punishment imaginable for someone like Camilla. She would still attend the event, but she would be rendered invisible the night of reckoning. Understanding the punishment requires understanding what Camilla wanted most: acceptance, recognition, the visual proof that she belonged at the center of the monarchy. Instead, she would be forced to attend the very event where her scheme had been designed to humiliate Catherine, and she would watch as Catherine stepped into the spotlight, wearing the Rose of Windsor tiara. But here's what made it truly devastating. Camilla couldn't simply not attend. Absence would raise immediate questions, the press would demand explanations, speculation would explode. So she had to be there, present, but powerless, visible, but voiceless. When Camilla entered Clarence's house and saw the evidence laid out, when she understood that everyone knew exactly what had been attempted, the mask on her face flickered for just a moment. She didn't explode, she couldn't, because any outburst would be a confession. Instead, she did what she'd perfected over decades. She converted her rage and cold composure. She would attend, she would play her role. But in her mind, she was already calculating the next move, because people like Camilla don't forget humiliation. They remember, they plan, they wait. Catherine's moment. As the gala approached, Catherine felt the shift in atmosphere, more messages being relayed, eyes lingering on her longer, the external questions from the press corps growing sharper, more pointed. Camilla was attempting one final play, create enough tension and speculation that Catherine would show some cry. Back in her composure, one moment of visible stress, 1 second of uncertainty captured by the cameras, and tomorrow's headlines wouldn't be about diplomacy, they'd be about what's wrong with Catherine. But Catherine had learned something crucial during her years in the royal family: the cameras always find the person who doesn't tremble. She walked through the palace corridors with absolute discipline, not desperate, not seeking reassurance, just present, prepared, unshakable. When she finally stepped into the main appearance area wearing the Rose of Windsor tiara that had been returned to its rightful place, something remarkable happened. The heritage piece rested on her head not as a trophy, but as a statement that required no words. She belonged there. The institution had chosen her, and all the scheming, all the jealousy, all the attempts to undermine her had failed. Camilla as public humiliation. Throughout the entire evening, Camilla experienced punishment in the truest royal style. Not through accusation or confrontation, but through systematic exclusion. Every time the cameras panned, Camilla was positioned just outside the frame. Every time the important groupings formed for photographs, Camilla was a step out of alignment. Every time there was a space near Catherine that carried significance, it was immediately filled by someone else. No one told Camilla to step back, but all night, through 1,000 tiny adjustments in positioning and protocol, she was made to understand she was no longer the one making decisions. She was being tolerated, not celebrated, for someone who had fought for decades to be accepted, who had worked tirelessly to killed her public image. This was the ultimate humiliation. Being present but irrelevant in the very moment she had wanted to shine. The guests noticed, the staff noticed, most importantly Camilla noticed. She had been present all night, yet it was as if she didn't exist. The aftermath and unresolved tensions. Laura Lobes was quietly removed from the palace's inner circle. No dramatic announcement, no public scandal, just the kind of surgical excision that the royal family has perfected over centuries. Charles couldn't deny what had happened. He couldn't reclaim Camilla Zayner with gestures or statements. What she had attempted had forced him into an impossible position. Choose silence to maintain public stability while, and during the internal destruction of trust. Catherine returned to her private quarters after the event and carefully removed the Rose of Windsor tiara. She didn't celebrate, she simply exhaled the breath of someone who had just walked along the edge of a cliff and survived. William understood what many didn't. This battle hadn't ended with its over. It had ended with a new reality. From now on, Catherine would live in the palace knowing exactly how far the jealousy around her could go. But the story doesn't end with resolution. It ends with a question that hangs over everything. What happens next? Camilla has been shamed in the way she feared most. She's been shown publicly and undeniably that there are limits to her position, that there are lines she cannot cross without consequences. But here's what makes this situation so dangerous. People like Camilla, once they've lost face, usually don't forget, they don't forgive, they recalculate. Will she accept being pushed to the margins? Will she quietly accept that Catherine represents the future while she's relegated to a supporting role? Or will there be another move, another scheme, perhaps more sophisticated, harder to trace, designed to finally tear down the woman she sees as having taken what should be hers? And what about Laura Lopes? She was caught. Her role in the scheme was undeniable. But was she acting alone, or was she a pawn in a larger game? Could she become the crack through which all the family secrets begin to leak? King Charles faces his own impossible choice. He can continue to maintain silence, preserving the appearance of unity, while the internal tensions eat away at the institution. Or he can finally take a side, make a definitive choice between his wife and his heir's wife, knowing that decision could split the monarchy from within. The bigger picture, this story isn't just about a tiara, it's about power dynamics that have existed for as long as monarchies have existed. About the clash between old establishments and new generations. About jealousy, ambition, and the brutal reality of living in a system where every gesture carries symbolic weight. Catherine has won this battle. She stood in the spotlight, wore the heritage, and survived an attempt to destroy her reputation. But in the royal family, winning one battle doesn't mean the war is over. The Rose of Windsor tiara has been returned to its proper place. The security protocols have been reviewed and strengthened. The public appearance was flawless. But inside Buckingham Palace, everyone knows the truth. The most dangerous threads don't come from outside, they come from the jealousy right inside the house. Questions for you. As we close this chapter of royal drama, consider these questions. Do you think Camilla will attempt another scheme? Or has she learned her lesson? Should King Charles have taken a stronger stance? Or was the quiet punishment the smartest approach? How much damage has been done to the relationship between Charles and William? Can a father and son truly move past something like this when it involves their wives? And perhaps most importantly, is Catherine truly safe now? Or has she simply survived the first attack and what will be a longer war? The palace walls hold many secrets, some are whispered, some are buried, but this one has left a mark that won't fade easily. The Rose of Windsor tiara sits in its secure location tonight, cleaned and polished, waiting for the next significant event. But it carries a new history now, a reminder that in the royal family jewelry is never just jewelry, it's power, it's recognition. It's the visible proof of who matters and who doesn't, and that's something worth scheming for, worth risking everything for, worth destroying reputations and relationships for. The question isn't whether there will be another conflict. The question is, when it comes, will Catherine be ready? Your thoughts matter. What do you think about this entire situation? Was Camilla justified in feeling overlooked, or did she cross a line that can never be uncrossed? Should Laura Lopes face more serious consequences? Or was the quiet removal from the royal circle punishment enough? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. This community has incredible insights, and I genuinely want to hear how you see this complex situation. If you found this story as compelling as I did researching and presenting it, make sure you hit that like button. It helps more people discover these deep dives into royal family dynamics. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, because trust me, this story is far from over. As new developments emerge, as tensions continue to simmer beneath the surface of royal appearances, we'll be here to break it all down for you. And here's what I want to know most. Do you think the monarchy can survive these internal conflicts in an age where every scandal goes viral, where public opinion shifts rapidly? How long can an institution maintain its mystique when the people inside it are engaged in these kinds of power struggles? The royal family has survived for over 1,000 years through wars, revolutions, scandals, and social upheaval, but it's never faced what it faces now, a 24/7 media environment where every crack gets mad. No Friday, where every tension gets analyzed, when nothing stays secret for long. Catherine walked away from this confrontation with her reputation intact. The Rose of Windsor tiara sits where it belongs. The diplomatic event was a success, but somewhere in the palace, Camilla is remembering every moment of that night. Every camera angle that excluded her, every positioning that pushed her to the edge, every second where she had to watch Catherine shine in the spotlight that she believed should have been shared, and people who remember humiliation that vividly usually don't stay quiet forever. The next chapter of this story is being written right now in quiet conversations behind closed doors, in carefully worded advice from trusted advisors, in the slow calculation of someone who has learned that direct confrontation doesn't work and is now considering more subtle approaches. Final thoughts. The British monarchy has always been as much about theatre as governance, about the careful staging of power and tradition, about making sure that every public appearance tells the right story. But what happens when the people performing in that theatre start writing their own scripts, when jealousy and ambition can override centuries of protocol, when the facade of unity cracks just enough for the public to see the tensions underneath? That's where we are now, in a moment where the institution is being tested not by external threats, but by the very people who are supposed to be its greatest protectors. Catherine has proven she can withstand direct attacks. She can maintain composure under extraordinary pressure. She can navigate the treacherous waters of palace politics while still calm.